They say the Wendigo is just a story, a warning passed down through winters long before mine, a spirit of hunger, of desperation, of men who turned to meat that wasn't meant to be eaten, a legend to keep people from wandering too far when the cold sets in. That's what I used to think too, just a myth. But then came the winter of 2020, when I saw it for myself, when the stories became something I could no longer deny. And I've carried the weight of that night ever since, because once you see the Wendigo, it never really leaves you. I was stationed at Ironwood Preserve, tucked up against the Canadian border, a stretch of wilderness that swallows you whole if you let it. Winters there are brutal, the kind that gnaw at you until even your bones ache. That December, we had an unusual number of missing hiker reports, not tourists, locals, trappers, hunters, even one old homesteader who knew the land better than anyone. All vanished without a trace. The snow made search parties difficult, but we combed the trails, checked the cabins, found nothing but the occasional broken branch or patch of blood-darkened ice. One night, after another fruitless day on the ridge, I sat in the station leafing through old ranger logs, a habit of mine, a way to pass the long hours. That's when I found something strange. Entries from the 1950s, notes from a ranger named Dawson. He wrote of vanishings back then too. Every few winters, always the same pattern. He said locals whispered of the Wendigo, a spirit that roamed when the snow piled deep, feeding on the lost and luring the living. Dawson never outright admitted belief, but his writing carried a fear I recognized. I told myself it was just folklore. But that night, as the wind howled outside, I dreamed of a figure standing at the tree line. Thin, impossibly tall, with eyes like hollow lanterns. Its breath steamed in the cold, though its lips never moved. When I woke, my window was frosted from the inside, as if something had stood there watching me while I slept. The real terror began 2 days later. A snowstorm had just broken, leaving the world white and silent when we got word of smoke spotted from the South Valley. I volunteered to check it, strapped on snowshoes and set out before dawn. The forest was suffocatingly still, not a bird or coyote in earshot, just the crunch of my steps. Hours in, I caught the faint scent of burning wood. Relief stirred, maybe a lost trapper's signal fire, but as I crested the ridge, my relief froze solid. The smoke came from a cabin, one that wasn't on any of our maps. Old half-collapsed, its timbers black with age. The snow around it was churned with tracks, bare human footprints, dozens of them, though no one sane would be walking barefoot in that cold. My gut screamed to turn back, but duty dragged me closer. Inside, the air was foul, not just from smoke, but from rot, thick and sweet, like meat left too long in the sun. The fire was nothing more than embers in a pit, barely warming the shadowy room. Bones littered the floor, human and animal jumbled together, gnawed clean. And in the corner, hunched over something I couldn't see, was a figure. At first I thought it was a man, tall, emaciated, skin stretched too tight over bones. But then it turned. And what faced me was no man. Its eyes burned pale, its mouth stretched far too wide, teeth jagged and yellow. The smell of rot grew sharper, overwhelming, and a sound rose from its throat, a shriek like the scream of wind through broken trees. My legs locked. My breath turned to ice in my chest. It lunged faster than anything that thin should move. I stumbled back, rifle shaking in my hands, firing blindly. The shot cracked through the cabin, but the thing only reeled, not from pain but surprise, like it hadn't expected me to fight. Then it was gone, slipping into the snow outside with a speed no human could match. I should have run back to the station. I should have radioed it in, but something compelled me to follow. Maybe duty, maybe madness. The footprints were easy to track. Deep gouges in the snow, claw marks scraping the earth beneath. They led me deeper into the valley, where the trees grew thick and the light dim, and then they simply stopped. Not faded, not covered, stopped as if the thing had vanished into the air. The forest pressed in around me, heavy with silence. My breath echoed too loud in my ears. Then I heard it, a voice, not out loud, but inside my skull, cold and hungry. It spoke my name. It promised warmth, food, survival. I clamped my hands over my ears, though it made no difference. The voice was in my bones. I don't remember much of the walk back. My next clear memory is stumbling into the station, frost clinging to my eyelashes, rifle gone. My fellow ranger Martinez said I was white as bone, lips blue, eyes unfocused. He asked what happened, but I couldn't speak. Not then, not ever fully. The official report chalked it up to disorientation, exposure, maybe hallucination. No mention of the cabin, the bones, the creature. They called the missing hunters a tragedy of the wilderness. Case closed, but I know what I saw. And I know it's not gone, because sometimes on the coldest nights I hear it again. The scratching at the station door. The whisper of my name in the wind. The hollow hunger pressing against the edge of my thoughts. And I know one day when I'm too tired to fight, it will call me into the forest. So if you ever find yourself in Ironwood in winter, and the forest grows too quiet, listen carefully. If you hear footsteps that don't match your own, if you smell rot in the frozen air, turn back. Don't follow. Don't look. Because once the Wendigo sees you, once it speaks your name, you're never truly free again. There's a lake deep inside the preserve that isn't on most maps. We call it Blackwater, though the name isn't official. Ask 10 rangers, and you'll get 10 different stories about how it got that name. Some say it's because the water looks darker than it should, even under bright sun. Some say it's because no one who goes into that water ever comes back out. But the truth is, Blackwater Lake isn't just a place, it's a curse. And I know because I watched it take someone with my own eyes. It started with a storm, as most of these stories do. Heavy rains in the spring of 2021 washed out half the trails in Iron Bend Preserve, flooding creeks and swelling rivers until they carved new paths through the forest. My assignment was to map the damage and check the lesser-used routes for hazards. That's how I ended up near Blackwater, a place I usually avoided. You don't patrol long without hearing whispers about that lake. Hikers go missing. Campsites abandoned overnight. Once, a search party found a canoe drifting in perfect condition. No gear, no damage. But the 2 men who rented it were never found. The elders in the nearest town warned us never to linger by its shores. The lake remembers, one woman told me, her eyes glassy with age. I smiled, nodded, filed it away as folklore. But deep down I stayed clear when I could. This time, though, the floods had turned every other trail to mud, and the fastest route back to base took me along Blackwater's edge. I told myself it was just a body of water, nothing more. As I approached, I realized how wrong that was. The lake stretched wide, ringed by pines that leaned inward, as though trying to keep something in. The surface was perfectly still, black as oil, reflecting the sky in a way that felt wrong, like a mirror that wasn't quite aligned. Even the air was different, thicker, heavy, carrying the faint smell of iron. My boots crunched gravel as I stepped closer, and for a moment, I swore the ripples on the water moved toward me, not away. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the far shore, maybe 30 yards away. A woman, tall, dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. No pack, no gear, no coat against the chill. Just staring at me across the water. I raised a hand, shouted. My voice echoed strangely, like the trees swallowed it. She didn't move, didn't even blink. Then, in the space of one breath, she was gone. Not walking, not turning. Gone. I told myself it was a trick of light, exhaustion, maybe stress, but unease gnawed at me all the way back to the station. That night I dreamed of water lapping at my bed, icy and black, rising until it filled my lungs. A week later, another ranger, Colton, went missing. He'd been on solo patrol near Blackwater. When he didn't check in, we organized a search. I tried to hide my dread as we fanned out, radios crackling, dogs straining at leashes. Hours passed before one of the handlers shouted. They'd found tracks, human boot prints leading straight to the lake's edge. And then, nothing. The water swallowed them whole. We dragged the lake for 2 days. Divers went in, though none lasted more than 20 minutes at a time. They said the water was wrong. Too dark, too cold, disorienting. One diver came back pale as death, insisting he'd seen lights moving beneath him, like lanterns swaying far below. Another swore he heard voices through his regulator, whispering his name. No body was ever recovered. After the search was called off, I couldn't let it go. Colton had been my friend, someone I'd trusted with my life. I returned to Blackwater alone, standing at the same spot where his prints ended. The lake was calm, unnaturally so, its surface unbroken despite the breeze rattling the trees. I stared into it, half expecting to see my own reflection. But what stared back wasn't me. The face in the water was hollow, eyes black voids, mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. Behind it shapes moved, human but not, twisted, floating, their limbs too long, their skin pale and wavering like reeds. My stomach turned to stone. I stumbled back, nearly falling, as the ripples reached for the shore. From then on, things got worse. Nights filled with dreams of drowning, of hands clutching my ankles, dragging me down into black water. Waking hours haunted by glimpses of figures between the trees, always vanishing when I blinked. The station pipes groaned with water that wasn't there, the air filled with the smell of rust and decay. The breaking point came one late patrol in June. The sun hung low, light spilling gold across the canopy. I was marking storm debris when I heard it, Colton's voice. Clear as day, calling my name from the direction of the lake. My chest clenched. I knew he was gone, for I'd seen the nothing where his trail ended. But hearing him, it was like being cut open. I followed. I couldn't not. Each step toward Blackwater felt heavier, the air thickening like syrup. When the trees parted, the lake spread before me, still and waiting. And there, standing at the shore, was Colton. He looked wrong. His skin was pale, lips bluish, eyes too wide. Water dripped from his hair, though the ground was dry. "Help me," he said, his voice low, distorted like it came from underwater. He held out his hand. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but my legs carried me forward, my hand rising toward his without my consent. The lake rippled hungrily at our feet, blackness churning just below the surface. I felt its pull in my chest, a tide inside my blood. At the last second, something broke through. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the memory of those hollow faces beneath the water. I jerked back, stumbling onto the gravel. Colton's expression twisted, his mouth gaping wider than humanly possible. A scream erupted, not from his throat but from the lake itself, a roar of 1,000 voices. The water surged upward in a wave, reaching for me. I turned and ran, the sound chasing me through the forest until my lungs burned. I never went back. I filed my report, sanitized, stripped of the truth. Missing ranger presumed dead, dangerous terrain, treacherous waters. The curse of Blackwater never made it into the paperwork, but I know it's still there waiting. Because sometimes even far from the preserve, I dream of it. I wake to the sound of dripping water, though the room is dry, the taste of rust on my tongue. And once, just once, I swear I heard Colton's voice outside my window, whispering my name. So if you ever find yourself near Blackwater Lake, don't stop to admire the view, don't stare into its surface. And whatever you do, don't answer if you hear someone calling your name from across the water. Because once the lake remembers you, it never lets go. I don't tell this story at the station anymore. The new recruits laugh and the veterans just shake their heads like I've let the woods get to me. Maybe I have. Maybe after 20 years patrolling these trails, mapping rivers, rescuing lost hikers, and zipping up more body bags than I'd like to admit. The forest finally broke me. But the thing is, I can still hear it at night, and I know what I saw. People vanish out here all the time. That's not unusual. Forests are big, merciless places. You take one wrong turn, one sprained ankle, one sudden storm, and the wilderness will swallow you whole. That's the story we tell ourselves when we find abandoned tents, cold campfires, boots still neatly laced without their owners. We say it's exposure, an accident, a bear maybe. It makes the paperwork cleaner and the families easier to console. But the truth is, not all disappearances can be explained by cliffs or coyotes. Some are different. Some are eaten. It started 3 summers ago after a particularly wet spring. The ground was soft, saturated, trails crumbling into gullies. Hikers complained of strange sinkholes opening overnight, sometimes just shallow pits, other times deep enough to swallow small trees. My job was to mark them, cordon them off, and log the hazards. At first, I treated them like any other seasonal damage. But then one hole caught my attention. It wasn't natural. The soil around it wasn't crumbling like erosion. It was peeled back, like something had pushed from underneath, forcing the earth upward, leaving a perfect circular mouth about 6 feet across. The edges were smooth, damp, almost slimy to the touch. I remember leaning close, shining my flashlight down, expecting to see roots or rocks, but the beam just disappeared into black. No bottom, no reflection, just a deep, wet void and a smell. Metallic like rust and faintly sweet like rotting fruit. I marked it, reported it, and kept moving. But that night I dreamed of the hole. I dreamed it was breathing, expanding and contracting like a lung beneath the forest. A week later, a couple from out of state went missing. Their car was found at the trailhead, their permits signed, their intended route logged, but no sign of them on the paths. Search parties combed the woods for days. Dogs picked up a scent and then lost it near the ridge, right where I'd seen the hole. I didn't say anything. Not then. Who would believe me? But then the disappearances kept happening. A solo backpacker, a pair of college kids, an old-timer who'd hiked those woods every summer for 30 years. Always in the same quadrant, always near where the earth had started to change. The ground felt different underfoot there, spongier, like stepping on hidden waterbeds. Sometimes, if you stood still, you could feel a faint vibration, a hum too low to be sound, but heavy enough to thrum in your bones. One evening, while I was out flagging damaged trails, I heard something. At first I thought it was thunder rolling across the valley, but the sky was clear, the sun bleeding orange through the trees. Then I felt it. The ground shifted under me, subtle but unmistakable, like the forest floor exhaled. I crouched low, pressing a palm to the soil, and I swear for a heartbeat I felt movement beneath it. Not water, not wind, something alive, something huge. I told myself it was nonsense. I told myself I was tired, dehydrated, imagining things. But 2 days later, we found a campsite in that same area. The tent collapsed, the sleeping bags still inside, the fire pit half burned, and no people. What unsettled me most was the ground around the tent. The soil was disturbed, but not like footprints. More like the earth had risen and swallowed everything whole, leaving faint, concentric ridges, as if something massive had shifted just beneath the surface. That night, I sat alone in the station, staring at the map. Every missing person, every sighting, every sinkhole, they formed a pattern. Not random, not scattered. A cluster, tightening around the ridge like a noose. The next morning, against every ounce of better judgment, I went back alone. I told the others I was checking flood damage. In truth, I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. I carried extra batteries, a rope, a sidearm I wasn't supposed to take, and enough adrenaline to make my hands shake. The ridge was quiet. Too quiet. No birdsong, no rustle of deer in the underbrush. Just silence, thick and expectant. I found one of the old sinkholes, larger now. The soil around it cracked like dry lips. I crouched at the edge, lowering my flashlight again. This time the beam caught something, movement, slow rippling like muscle sliding beneath skin. Then for a split second I saw it. A glisten of flesh, pale and wet, shifting deep below. I stumbled back, my chest tight, bile rising in my throat. The earth pulsed once, and a low groan rolled up through the soil, not sound but vibration, shaking my teeth. And then the hole began to close, not caving in, not collapsing, but sealing, as though lips were pressing shut. Within seconds the opening was gone, replaced by smooth, damp earth. If I hadn't seen it, I'd never have known it was there. I ran. I don't remember getting back to the station, only the taste of blood in my mouth from breathing so hard. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? The forest is alive and it eats people, doesn't exactly hold up in an incident report, but the disappearances didn't stop. They got worse. Whole groups began vanishing. Search parties turned up shredded packs, snapped poles, torn scraps of clothing tangled in roots. No bodies, never bodies. The ground took them all. The final straw came when one of our own went missing. Lisa, a rookie, young but sharp. She was stationed near the ridge, checking boundary markers. When she didn't check in, we mobilized immediately. Hours of searching turned up nothing. But I knew where to look. I went back to the ridge at dusk against orders, against reason. The ground trembled faintly underfoot, a steady pulse. I called her name, my voice cracking. The silence answered. Then from the trees ahead came a sound I'll never forget. Muffled screaming, choked, distant, like someone calling from underwater. I ran toward it, heart pounding, crashing through brush until I reached a clearing. And there, God help me, I saw her. Lisa, waist deep in the earth, arms thrashing, eyes wide with terror. The ground wasn't dirt anymore, it was flesh. Pale, pulsing, wet, gripping her like quicksand made of muscle. She screamed my name, hands reaching. I lunged forward, grabbing her wrists, pulling with every ounce of strength. For a moment I thought I had her, but the earth tightened, dragging her down inch by inch. Her scream gurgled, cut short as her head was pulled under. And then she was gone. The clearing fell silent. I stared at the smooth patch of soil where she'd been, my hands empty, my mind blank. The forest had eaten her. Alive, I don't remember leaving. Somehow I made it back, clothes torn, arms bruised from where she'd slipped from my grip. So I filed no report. I said nothing. Officially, Lisa was listed as missing, presumed dead. Another statistic. Another tragedy, but I know the truth. The forest is not just trees and soil and stone. It is alive and it is hungry. Something monstrous sleeps beneath it, stretching roots and tendrils through the earth, pulling down whatever stumbles too close. It is patient. It is endless. And it is growing. Sometimes late at night I hear the low hum of it under my floorboards. Sometimes I feel the ground shiver beneath my boots even miles from the ridge. And sometimes in the darkest hours, I swear I can still hear Lisa screaming, muffled and fading, from somewhere deep below. So if you ever hike Iron Bend Preserve and the ground feels soft underfoot, or the forest falls strangely silent, turn back. Don't linger. Don't listen, because the forest eats, and once it has your scent, it will never let you go.